For generations, we have been taught that we had to believe the story of the Exodus on faith alone. We were told that Mount Sinai, where Moses received the 10 Commandments, was located in Egypt, but there was no real evidence to bring the story to life, to make it believable. No pictures of left-behind artifacts, practically nothing to validate one of the most important stories of the Bible. The Bible repeatedly says the Israelites went out of Egypt and into Midian, modern-day Saudi Arabia. Why were we sticking to this traditional site in Egypt that had no evidence for so long? I read with total fascination how a couple of explorers had entered the area that they believed was the real Mount Sinai and seen various sites related to the Exodus. Images and stories that blew my mind, but according to them, these sites were kept secret by the Saudi government, a theocracy that hid them from the world using fences and police and the threat of force. They managed to evade police and sneak in, but they were caught. Their photos and videos were confiscated by the Saudi police. The evidence was lost. Using contacts we cannot disclose and methods we cannot disclose, we got into Saudi Arabia, and we got to the forbidden sites. Are we to believe no evidence was left behind, or had the evidence simply not seen the light of day? While the possibility of Moses and the Israelites being in Saudi Arabia is a relatively new theory to us in the outside world, it isn't new to the local Saudis that are living there. In Western Saudi Arabia, we were frequently approached by Saudis eager to talk to Americans for their first time face to face. And one of the first things they'd say with excitement is, "Did you know Moses was here? Let me show you where he and his people were." The Bible describes two mountains, Mount Sinai and Mount Horeb, almost interchangeably as if they are one or are connected. The famous historian Josephus says Mount Sinai is the highest mountain in the area. Here in Saudi Arabia, we have a match, Jabal al-Lawz, and an adjacent lower mountain, Jebel Makla. Here, there is plenty of room for the entire population of Israelites to camp, as the Exodus story would require. The peak of Jabal Makla is blackened, and the rocks are only black from the outside, a perfect illustration of the Lord descending upon Sinai like a fire, as the Bible describes. Advocates of this site disagree as to whether the blackened peak is a natural formation, or if this is proof of the mountain being burned from the outside. Now we're standing at the base of what's believed to be the real Mount Sinai, and behind me you can see what may be where God told Moses to go, the cleft rock, when he was speaking at Mount Sinai and was descending upon it like a fire. He told Moses to go to a cleft rock, and then that's also where he got the 10 Commandments. And you can see a site behind me where it would match that description, and the blackened peaks around me would match the description possibly of the real Mount Sinai. So as you can see, we have the different key features here of the Exodus story all in one spot. When Moses initially flees Egypt after killing an Egyptian, he escapes to Midian as a fugitive. There, he sits by a well and he meets the daughters of Jethro who are getting water for his flock. Moses then marries one of his daughters. Here in Saudi Arabia, not too far from the possible location of the real Mount Sinai, is a well that the Saudis have fenced in as a sensitive archaeological site. Here, we were approached by multiple Saudis who excitedly told us that this is where that story took place, and the area where Jethro resided. One of the Saudis was actually traveling from the other side of the country to come see where Moses walked in Saudi Arabia. There are two proposed crossing sites from Egypt into Saudi Arabia, each with a land bridge that could allow the Israelites to have a path across once the water was divided. The first candidate is at the Straits of Tiran, at the bottom of the Sinai Peninsula. The second candidate is Nuweiba Beach. At Egypt's Nuweiba Beach, the Israelites would have been stuck with mountains on all sides, with the Red Sea in front of them and Pharaoh's army on the path behind them, just as the Bible says. And right at this point, there is an underwater land bridge that is 9.6 miles long, connecting the Egyptian beach to Saudi Arabia. Researchers like Dr. Leonard Muller have examined the coral bed here and found what they describe as strange anomalies, where it appears the coral wrapped around debris that could resemble the remains of Pharaoh's army. We had planned to dive at this site because it's a public diving site, with stores where you can go and rent diving equipment. At this point, the Saudi police were onto us, and they showed up. And although it's a public diving spot, they said we needed a permit, and we couldn't proceed. We were accompanied by police until we left. According to the Exodus story, Moses and the Israelites stop at a place on the way to Mount Sinai named Elim. In need of water, they find a unique location with 12 wells and 70 palms. At this site, there is a distinct location of palm trees and, to this day, 12 wells. Multiple Saudi locals pointed us to this location as Elim. The historian Josephus recorded that Elim with its wells and palms could still be seen when he was alive between 37 and 100 AD. While Moses is up on Mount Sinai, some of his followers build a golden calf to worship and set up an altar in front of it. The golden calf is placed up high enough for Moses to see it, and when he does, he destroys the golden calf and sprinkles its remains into the nearby stream. Near Jebel Makla, there is a strange structure that the Saudis have fenced in and declared as an archaeological site. There is a sign in English and Arabic warning against intruders, and it's near the police station guarding the mountain. The golden calf worshippers say, "These are your gods, O Israel." Are these petroglyphs part of that worshipping of cows that took place while Moses was on Mount Sinai? If so, this may be the remains of the golden calf altar or the stand that the golden calf was placed on. The Saudi government denies that this site is related to the Exodus, but still concedes that these petroglyphs date back to between 3000 BC and 1500 BC. Near the possible remains of the golden calf altar, there is another fenced-in site. It appears to be an ancient, pre-Islamic graveyard. The Saudis apparently know it is significant somehow, but we don't. However, we know that the worshippers of the golden calf were killed right after it was destroyed. Could this be their final resting place? The book of Exodus says Moses built an altar at the foot of Mount Sinai along with 12 pillars, representing the 12 tribes of Israel. And, right at the foot of this mountain, we find a possible altar and the remains of about 12 pillars. The structure is clearly man-made. You can see the chutes where animals might have been brought in for sacrifices. It is made of uncut stone and without steps, just as God's instructions to Moses require. According to Jim and Penny Caldwell, an American couple that used to live in Saudi Arabia and explore the site, ash was found in the area where sacrifices may have taken place. Although the Saudis dismiss any notion that this is related to Moses' altar, or an altar at all, they admit that if you dig at the site, you'll find ash, animal waste, and bones at the site. Right next to it, there are the remains of marble pillars. About 10 of the foundation stones are still clear to see. According to the Caldwells, the foundations of these pillars could be more clearly seen in the early 1990s, and the pillars were built in 3 rows of 4. What is significant about this pattern is that it is the same pattern that Exodus 28 says the high priest would arrange stones in his breastplate to represent the 12 tribes of Israel. 3 rows of 4. According to the Bible, the prophet Elijah travels for 40 days and 40 nights to get to the Mount Sinai area, and he finds a cave on the mountain where he talks to God. The real Mount Sinai must therefore have a cave that is accessible and where someone could sleep safely. There is one cave here that is clear to see if you are walking on the ground level. Right beneath the cleft rock, just below the same spot where God may have spoken to Moses, you can see this cave. It is about 15 feet high, 20 feet long, and 20 feet deep. If this is the real Mount Sinai, then this is almost certainly the cave of Elijah, and it'd be in the same spot where Moses would have met God previously. The Bible also records that a brook flowed down from Mount Sinai, serving as a water source for the Israelites. This is the same stream that Moses uses to dispose of the golden calf's remains. At this mountain, it is very easy to see where there was once a stream coming down. It comes down right next to the structure at the foot of the mountain that may be Moses' altar, which would allow him to dispose of any waste. It then continues to the flat area at the bottom where the Israelites would have camped. The stream bed is also close to the possible golden calf site, again matching the most minor details of the Exodus story. The Israelites again become thirsty, desperate for water with none in sight. God tells Moses to find a distinct rock known as the rock at Horeb and strike it with his rod. He does, and it results in a dramatic miracle where water pours out, providing relief to the people. In one of the books by Josephus, it is stated that the rock could still be seen by travelers and was too big to move. To identify this rock, you need to find a large rock in a dry area, somewhat near Mount Sinai, with enough room for the Israelites to camp and a path to the mountain. You'd also need room for a battlefield because the Israelites fought the Amalekites at this location. Is there a mountain that matches all of these details? The answer is yes, and it is stunning. One of the greatest miracles of the Exodus story is when Moses finds that the Israelites need water. They're in a hot, barren area without water to be seen anywhere. And so one of the greatest miracles happens when Moses strikes a rock and the rock splits and water pours forth. For so many people this sounds just like legend, but right near the alleged site of Mount Sinai, we come across this massive split rock. And one of the most distinguishing features of this is, as you can see below it and then also to the side, is that the rock is smooth, as if tons and tons of water came straight from that rock down and then filled the area. As we were driving here, the rocks were all jagged, square-shaped, circle-shaped. It was terrible for the car. But then right here, and only right here, below the rock, the area is smooth. And so when you're coming around that corner, you have no idea what you're about to see, and then this is right there, surprising you, looking at you as you come around that corner. And this is one of the strongest pieces of evidence that the Exodus did in fact happen in Saudi Arabia, right here. According to Dr. Glenn Fritz, who has a PhD in environmental geography and has studied the area closely, the split rock and the area beneath it show clear signs of erosion from water. Amazingly, he also sees how God may have manipulated science to make this miracle happen. He sees signs of underground faults that could channel water to this spot into aquifers beneath the ground. Seismic activity could cause water to burst from the ground at that exact spot, at that exact time. This possible phenomenon may be linked to Psalms 114, 7 through 8, where a tremble is described as the water poured forth. According to the Caldwell family who lived in Saudi Arabia, locals refer to this site with an Arabic name that means the water of Moses. It was here, with the golden calf site in front of me, with the sun behind Mount Sinai, with the cleft rock where the 10 Commandments may have been received over to the right, that the Exodus came alive. You could see exactly how Moses, while on Mount Sinai receiving the 10 Commandments, could have had direct line of sight of the golden calf from the cleft rock. You could see how there was plenty of room for the Israelites to camp. You could see how a brook came down from the mountain right next to Moses' altar at the foot of the mountain and then came near the golden calf site where Moses could destroy it and throw its remains into the stream. All of these little details have to fit, and they fit. After I came back from the trip, people asked how I felt, standing there where so few people have been able to. And the predictable feelings were easy to describe: adrenaline, amazement, awe, disbelief that I was there. But there was an emotion that was more difficult to describe. I didn't deserve to be there. I'm not a missionary who has risked his life to preach the faith or to deliver humanitarian aid to those in need. I'm not someone who has given away all his wealth to the poor. I'm not a scientist or an archaeologist or a pastor. I'm not a Bible scholar, and I still have days where I feel like I have no faith at all. I can't tell you why I was among the handful of people who got to go, or what I'm supposed to do with it. I can't prove to you this is the real Mount Sinai and the Exodus happened, but what I can tell you is this. This information is coming out, one way or another. We're entering a period we've never been in before, one where the evidence for the Exodus story and the Bible overall is suddenly becoming available and is only a click away for anyone on Earth with an internet connection. And as these sites are revealed, it will change the Middle East forever and impact the billions of people around the world who follow Judaism, Christianity, Islam, and those with no faith at all. The world is about to change.